Joe Biden makes it official. He is running for president. Is this the best the Democrats have to offer? Welcome back in to Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Joe Biden does officially what everyone had been figuring he'd do, launching a third bid for the presidency, and doing so with a video centered on Charlottesville and President Trump as an unrepentant racist intent on advancing or turning a blind eye to white supremacy. We'll examine Biden's chances as he enters the race as the putative frontrunner in a field now approaching 24 candidates. America is the world's most charitable nation, something we often take for granted, but with tax season now finally over, we'll drill down on just how charitable the country really is and how dependent the country is on charity in our Foundations of Democracy segment featuring Abby Moffat, head of one of the nation's largest charitable foundations. Plus, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza joins us for Talkin' Liberty. Is Joe Biden really the best the Democrats have to offer for president? Seriously? Up to this point in the nascent Democratic presidential primary race, the 20 or so candidates for the highest office in the land have attempted, at least rhetorically, to claim that their campaigns are based on something more than simply undiluted hatred for Donald Trump. But apparently not Joe Biden. In a stunning announcement video based on the single theme of Trump as a full-on racist, replete with haunting images of scary white supremacists marching in Charlottesville, Biden has evidently decided that naked virtue signaling and stoking fear of the Nazi-like figure in the Oval Office will be enough to hold his position at the top of the Democratic field and deflect attention from his own record over 40 years as a permanent politician.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. If we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation.
And so Sleepy Joe, as he was recently called by President Trump, begins his long-anticipated campaign with a video based on a flagrant distortion. Like everyone else on the left, Biden twisted the words of President Trump, quote, there were very fine people on both sides, unquote, in the infamous Charlottesville march. Never mind that Trump specified who he was describing and who he was not describing. We don't have time to play you everything Trump said about Charlottesville, but once more, for the record, here are the critical parts of what the president actually said.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And you take a look at some of the groups, and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week? And is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop? There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
Of all the distortions the media has engaged in about Trump, Charlottesville may be the worst, other than Russian collusion, of course. And now Joe Biden is basing his whole campaign on that distortion. Biden, of course, realizes that the black vote will be critical to his third shot at the presidency, so he pulled no punches in this naked attempt to depict himself, vice president under the nation's first black president, as the savior of a people he once famously said would be put back in chains by the Republican Party. Never mind that it's Trump who's produced the lowest black unemployment rate ever recorded. Of course, most people don't notice that because the elite media mentions it only in passing as they condemn the president day after day. Alternately known as Uncle Joe among mainstream Democrats, and creepy Uncle Joe among many who've witnessed his unwanted advances towards women throughout the years, Biden has already engaged in a multi-pronged apology tour in advance of his official announcement. Now, hardly a paragon of political courage, Biden recently called Vice President Pence a decent guy. And then after one angry tweet from an LGBTQ activist, he apologized an hour later. He lamented, "I wish I could have done something," about the treatment of Anita Hill in the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearing in 1991, even though he was the chairman of the very Senate Judiciary Committee which conducted the hearing. And in his most shameless act of pandering, he recently decried a white guy culture that has got to change, somehow failing to grasp or papering over the fact that he is widely viewed as a poster child for that very corporatist culture. Or perhaps he actually believes his renunciation of a culture that has benefited him to an extraordinary degree over a life lived entirely within the political realm will result in forgiveness from the woke crowd he seeks to win over in the conga line Democratic primary. But Biden's most famous and recent apology came after no less than 6 women admitted publicly that they were creeped out by his handsy behavior towards them over the years.
Social norms have begun to change, they've shifted, and the boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset. And I get it. I hear what they're saying. I understand it. And I'll be much more mindful. That's my responsibility, and I'll meet it.
Now, that statement was remarkable because he said, social norms have changed, thus leaving the impression that he believes what he did was fine then, but not now in the Me Too era, so he'll change his ways. Biden is also hoping people will forget about his 2 previous disastrous runs for the Oval Office. In 2008, after his famously amusing, clean and articulate description of Barack Obama, he quit the race after garnering less than 1% of the vote in the first contest in Iowa. Hence, the new nickname attached to him by President Trump, 1% Joe. Now, in 1988, Biden was forced to pull out of the Democratic primary after revelations about multiple instances of plagiarism. He mimicked entire portions of a speech by British politician Neil Kinnock and acknowledged plagiarizing a law review journal for a paper he wrote in law school. He also claimed to be the first one in his family to attend college, which was a lie, and that he finished in the top half of his law school class, when in fact he finished near the bottom. Then there's the matter of Biden's son and his ties to the Ukraine. Hunter Biden joined Burisma Holdings, one of Ukraine's largest oil and natural gas companies, in April of 2014. He was paid $166,000 a month, despite zero background or expertise in Ukrainian affairs or energy. Then the company came under investigation for corruption and money laundering by Viktor Shokin, the nation's prosecutor general, who was promptly fired after threats from Biden's Obama administration to pull $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees to Ukraine. You'll hear more about that, rest assured. The leftists in the Democratic Party will not forget Biden's support for the Iraq War. They won't forget his sponsoring of the 1994 crime bill, which resulted in a marked increase in black incarceration. And then there's Biden's statement in 1973 that gay people working for the federal government would be, quote, security risks. See what happens when you've been a part of the ruling class for more than 4 decades? A long record with much to attack, especially for this famously gaffe-prone politician. So Biden was unable to resist his standing as putative frontrunner in this race based largely, of course, on mere name recognition, but he's evidently convinced that this third shot at the White House will be the charm. What exactly does he think voters who so thoroughly rejected him twice before will find appealing in him this time? In a party given over to identity politics and radical change, he's an old white guy who represents the Obama status quo, which was rejected in 2016 so thoroughly that voters were willing to roll the dice on a bombastic political novice and serial disruptor in Donald Trump. There are so many problems with Joe Biden that he could spend the whole campaign attempting to explain them all away. Is this really the best Democrats can do to make Donald Trump a one-term president? We'll take a quick break and then get away from politics for a moment to discuss charitable giving in Americans. How significant is it, and how important is it to the economy? We'll talk about it in just a moment.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel because
truth is
making
come back.